Hey guys, how you doing? I've had more than a few people suggest that I do videos on some of the common, I guess, emotions that come up from starting jiu-jitsu or doing jiu-jitsu. And for for men and women, it's remarkably similar. I mean, they kind of approach the art with a different perspective, and it varies a lot, I'm sure. But for the most part, women tend to turn up feeling that they're not going to be able to do it. That they realize, like, I'm not a fighter. I don't know how to fight, and I don't know how to protect myself, and I want to learn. So they're very open to the whole process and kind of usually undervalue their abilities and are quite surprised that they pick it up really quickly and do well at it. Most guys, not all, but a lot. And I mean, I was I was the atypical example of like the arrogant guy. I mean, I've been fighting all my life and training in martial arts my whole life, um, and a lot of security work and things like that. So I had a big fight experience. Um, but even for guys who don't, and I mean, you guys have all seen the memes on social media, like guys overestimate their ability to fight by like 400%, and it's probably accurate, And I think that guys coming into the art, they come for different reasons for sure, but everybody wants to feel more secure in themselves and more confident and capable, and to feel safer in the world. And if something does kick off, that you can kind of handle yourself and survive the situation. But many guys, and I'm yet to kind of meet any that would disagree with it, that it's a very, very humbling experience. And if it's really common that trauma and insecurity and feelings of vulnerability and things like this come up and come to the surface pretty readily, even without like the whole concept of sparring and rolling and stuff like that. Even just drilling and being held under somebody and realizing that you don't know how to get out, forces you to be confronted with reality, which is that you don't know how to fight, that you are insecure, and maybe even insecure in many aspects of your life, not just a physical one. But the physical one for guys, I think, is a particularly like triggering mechanism, because I know that the statistics on women being raped and assaulted and stuff like that, especially when they're young, has come to the forefront these days. But like a lot of guys don't talk about it, but the rates of like child rape and molestation and stuff like that are not that much different for guys. Guys just don't talk about it. Or whether it's like severe bullying at school, or whether it's poor parenting, whatever it happens to be, if you haven't dealt with it, and it's a difficult thing to deal with, and maybe we never kind of get over it, but those feelings of inadequacy and a lack of control and being dominated and stuff like this really affect a lot of people. And then through their inability to be able to process and deal with that through most of their life, then anger and aggression is usually like a byproduct of that. And I was definitely in that category. When I very first saw a therapist in like my late 20s, I had a terrible childhood and stuff like this, a lot of dramas, and I'd never really dealt with it. I dealt with it by fighting and training and getting in the gym and making myself massive and feeling invincible and things like that. And then when I started jiu-jitsu, like all of my illusions were just smashed, and I had to admit that, like, I could fight, but like not like the whole jiu-jitsu thing was like totally different. Even though I'd done judo and stuff like that, then it really didn't prepare me whatsoever. And so chatting to a few students this week, they suggested that I do a video about this kind of stuff, so that people entering the art, I don't really like to refer to it as a sport. I mean, there is a sportive aspect to it, but it's a martial art for sure, especially the way that I teach it. And so I think that entering into the martial art, it's different than those striking arts and things like that, because when you're at a distance and you kind of play fighting and stuff like that, then you can hold on to these fallacies that have stuck with you for a long time. But when you're stuck on the ground and you're underneath somebody and you can't get out, and you know you can't, even if they're not fighting you hard, even that will like bring up all these feelings and stuff like that, and that can generate some anger and stuff like that. So it's really important. One of the important things that I learned through therapy was that anger is insecurity. Yeah, it's a useful emotion. Like a girl cheats on you, for example, you get really mad. It gives you the energy and the drive to like get out of the relationship, to find a house, to get all the stuff done that you have to do, to and it will give you a lot of energy, and then you'll like maybe go to the gym and take it out on in a positive way, hopefully, rather than just drinking yourself to death, which doesn't help. Empathy, for example, tends to be kind of lethargic and stuff like that, and less useful in situations like that. I'm not saying don't be empathic, but like lethargy is not a great sensation. Anyway, so taking that anger and understanding where it comes from, like where is this anger, where is the insecurity that's underneath that's driving these feelings of aggression, and quite often people will use aggression to push people away because they're feeling vulnerable. Yeah, and so it's like everyone's scared of a mad dog, right? Even though the dog's really, really insecure, and it's really common with small dogs that they feel insecure, so they're aggressive to scare people away, because like if they actually came close, they'd realize that I'm small and I can't do anything. And so, it's very, very common. So if you do find yourself particularly angry or aggressive, really start looking backwards, especially into your childhood. Most of the stuff happens before the age of 7, definitely before the age of 10, not always, but usually there's stuff there to do with, poor parenting, parents breaking up, parents neglecting us and things like that. And we just kind of hold on to those feelings and kind of survive. And quite often the feelings of inadequacy and anger, having the energy from the anger, and then the inadequacy driving us to like try and achieve, creates high achievers quite often. So what you can find quite often is that a person will outwardly look very successful. I had competed in I don't know how many sports at national level. My whole house was covered in trophies and certificates and things like this, but I was a mess, and so like that drive, it looks like success, and a lot of people would be jealous of you and jealous of your success, whether it's sporting, it can be business, like it would be quite easy to imagine that a child, male or female, usually male, who was like abused or bullied or whatever when they were young, has this like screw you kind of mentality and decides like, screw everybody, I'm going to go do this thing, or I'm going to achieve. And that burning desire to achieve all the time and the success that comes from it is really being fueled by a place of insecurity, and that, it breeds success, in the business world and things like this. But I think if you would then look at the person's relationships, then you would probably find something lacking in those for sure, And so if you're starting jiu-jitsu or have started jiu-jitsu and these feelings do come up, then don't quit, because I have a saying, which is the gold is on the other side of discomfort. Yeah. So something that you're challenged by, like you're volunteering to go to Jiu Jitsu, you know that it's a good idea, you know that there's value in it, and yet you're challenged by going there, whether you're male or female. Sometimes it could be a physical challenge, sometimes it could be a mental, emotional challenge, but there's still a challenge there. The gold is on the other side of that. If you keep running away from it all the time, if the feeling of going makes you anxious, if you avoid it, the anxiety is going to grow. Yeah, it's going to become a monster that you think is like unconquerable, which is not true. I get really anxious, yeah, and I have a lot of feelings of insecurity, you know. I mean, I used to be quite the physical beast, shredded and jacked and all that sort of stuff. And it was really funny. I joined a weight training gym like 6 months ago, and I literally would find myself pulling up to the gym and being so racked with anxiety that I couldn't train. Or sometimes I would get in there and be in the middle of a first or second set, or sometimes it's half an hour into it, and I would be shaking with anxiety, and I would leave. I'd feel like I'm going to throw up or faint or something, and I would have to leave. And I knew why it was, you know, that I was comparing myself, excuse me, to my old self. And I felt like I've got an okay physique. I'm like 80 kilos and reasonably lean and reasonably fit and strong and things. But it's not about, others looking at me would think that that was ridiculous. Yeah. But this is the emotional struggle that so many people have, whether it's jiu-jitsu or whether it's weight training. I've had a number of women who have told me that they've sat in the car and cried, trying to convince themselves to come to class, and sometimes they can't, and then sometimes they can, and then by persevering and pushing through that discomfort, yeah, it's amazing. Now they don't have to worry about that. Now they can get out of the car and they get into class, they enjoy the class, they get a lot out of it, and they're really growing. They're really growing, and it's incredible. And I tell them all the time how amazing it is to watch it, you know, because I understand that struggle. I get it. You know, nobody would look at me as this, like, you know, high-grade black belt that's accomplished all these things, that's so physically confident when it comes to fighting and things like that, that me going to the gym would be such a big deal. But there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, after breaking my back and all that sort of stuff, I became very, very socially withdrawn. I spent years at home by myself, unable to leave the house. And then if I did leave the house, I would have hundreds of spasms so bad that I would collapse on the floor and be unable to walk. So you get very embarrassed when those things happen. I would go to the supermarket and collapse in the supermarket, screaming in agony. And so I would be so embarrassed by that I just wouldn't go, you know, and I'd get my partner to go. But sometimes I'd have to go, and I'd have to be like, okay, so when am I going to go? I'm going to go usually really late at night, so there's nobody there. So if something like that does happen, then I'm less embarrassed. But eventually what tends to happen is you just don't go. Yeah. You just avoid it because, like, it becomes so painful. You can't go out in public. You're afraid to go out in public, you know, and you just feel that, like, you're such a burden on society and you're kind of worthless and unproductive and things like that. So a lot of those feelings still come up too, for sure. And in going to the gym and seeing all these, like, really physically imposing males and females and everyone's super fit and half my age and stuff like that, then my feelings of inadequacy and stuff like that come up, and it was debilitating for a long time. It's only recently, after 6 months of forcing myself to go, that I'm actually enjoying going there. I can chat to some people while I'm there, starting to make friends and stuff like that in the gym. But it's a real thing, and it's debilitating. But the main cure to anxiety is action, and specifically the action that you're afraid of taking. Because then when you attempt it, you realize that the mountain that you thought it would be is not that bad. You know, that you can overcome it. If you avoid it, the mountain's only going to grow, because the further away that you push yourself from it, the bigger it's just going to seem. So the main cure to anxiety is get to the bottom of it, but also do the thing that you're most afraid of, because it's the action of pushing up against that resistance, up against that anxiety, that's going to help you realize that you are capable of doing it. And that the mountain isn't as dramatic or as scary as you thought, you know. And I'm very lucky that I know a bit about this stuff, so that when I have these feelings, I'm aware of them, I know where they come from, I know what they're about, and I know what the cure is. And it's not comfortable. It's very uncomfortable doing it, and it can be quite terrifying. It's not comfortable in the slightest. Likewise, people who are depressed, you know, and many people get depressed and get anxious. So the depression is almost always related to something in your past. Yeah, anxiety is typically about things in the future, a fear of the future, a fear of imagined things that might happen, right? Nothing's happened yet, you don't know, you don't have a crystal ball, but you're fearful of possible outcomes in the future. Depression can't be about the future, it's about the past. Yeah, for me, looking back at, you know, the massive Jiu Jitsu business that I had, the success that I had, the physicality that I had, the success I had physically and things like this, if I look back and constantly compare myself to who I used to be and what I used to have, of course you're going to feel down, especially if what you have now is less than you had before. Yeah, and then all the feelings of inadequacy come up again, and you're like, oh, you know, like for me, I learnt from the mistakes of the past, or I'm trying to, and doing my best to learn from them and to not make the same mistakes again. If I'm constantly looking backwards and comparing myself to who I was, of course I'll feel depressed, you know. And then if I start looking too far forwards and imagining negative things in the future, of course I'm going to be anxious. So then the question is always, well, what's the cure to this anxious and depressed situation? Well, it's to be present. It's to neither look at the past, yeah, or to learn from it, yeah, to look back, and if there are negative things there, to go, okay, well, what's the lesson from that, and let's carry that lesson that we learned forwards so that we don't repeat it. You know, and if somebody did you wrong in the past, to not dwell on that, but to find forgiveness, to understand that person and what led to that happening. You don't have to forget it, but being able to forgive it allows you to move on. Yeah, so it can feel like if I was bullied, for example, which I was at school like most people, if I held on to that, then like that could make me depressed. But if I look at it and I understand that this kid was beaten up at home, and you know, he was getting beaten up, so like it's a pecking order thing. So his way of like regaining his lost self-esteem from home was to come to school and bully smaller kids at school, and thus increase his self-esteem, because he knows he has to go home again that night and get treated like the nail again, and you don't want to be a nail all the time. So understanding that allows me to go, okay, well, I'm not condoning that behavior, I'm not condoning bullying, but do I understand it? Yeah, I understand it. Can I forgive that kid? Yeah, he was a kid beaten up by his parents, feeling very insecure, came to school, decided to pick on me and some other kids to make himself feel better, right? So by understanding, by looking at the person that's done you wrong, really understanding their background and going, wow, that could easily have been me, I understand that, then it allows you to kind of forgive what happened and move forward. So there's quite a bit to it, and definitely if you're struggling, then go see a cognitive behavioral therapist. I'm not a fan of psychiatrists and pharmaceutical medication. I think it's dramatically overprescribed these days, as there's more than enough information about. And a lot of the time, the medication given is really just to cover up behavioral issues that are going to be time consuming and complicated to unpack. So it's just like a band-aid over it. So the best thing is to go back and really deeply look, even if it's painful, at what it was that has set up this thinking, this narrative that you have in your head, either about yourself or other people or women or men or partners or whatever it happens to be. And to really start looking deeply into it. And, you know, like, it's still a struggle for me every day. You know, what I went through with my back was a horrific experience that lasted for, I don't know, 4 to 8 years, depends on the severity that you look at it at. And it was a very, very difficult time. And I try and just live in gratitude for what I have now. I'm a very impatient person. I want everything done yesterday. I expect miraculous things to occur in myself. I'm very driven and ambitious. And if things are not happening as quickly as I'd like, I find myself getting very frustrated. And so, especially when, you know, like people who are in positions of power, for example, have control of my business in some way, and I don't think that they are doing their job properly and it's impacting on my business and my students and my staff, I get very upset by that. So I have to like quell that by trying to live in gratitude and understand that, like, you know, maybe government departments don't work as smoothly as what private ones do. Anyway, yeah, that's my little chat about that sort of stuff. Don't be surprised if a lot of really strong emotions come up from doing jiu-jitsu and starting it. Don't let them put you off. If you're really anxious then, or depressed or have any other sort of stuff, you know, go and speak to your coach about it. Let them know so that they can be more understanding, because I mean, yeah, a lot of students do need a kick in the butt, you know, and you come to us for a bit of motivation and a little bit of butt kicking. If we're aware of your history, then, you know, like, we can maybe tailor our approach to you a little bit better and maybe not be such a hard ass. Anyway, if you have any questions about all this sort of stuff, feel free to get hold of me in the comments. People have emailed me before. You can get hold of me through Logan Lee Jiu Jitsu. Yeah, it's a long road. It's not a sprint. There's a lot to learn on the mat and off it. There's a lot of emotions that come up. There's a lot of physical issues that you have to deal with. But it's an amazing process of personal development. It's far more than like just a martial art or a sport. And the longer you do it, the more that you'll understand that. Have a great day. Chat soon.